The plane dipped through clouds like torn silk, and suddenly the mountains appeared, sharp, unforgiving, endless. Ridges the color of rust and ash cut across the horizon. Their peaks, still brushed with snow in the late summer sun, looked less like mountains and more like monuments carved by something ancient and indifferent. The man in the window seat pressed his forehead to the glass. He had traveled to places of noise before, cities that demanded your attention, beaches that promised distraction. But this was different. The airstrip at Leh looked like it had been scratched onto the valley floor, a narrow lifeline between the jagged earth and the pale blue sky. When the plane touched down, he felt the thinness of the air immediately. Each breath carried weight, like the mountains themselves demanded effort from him. Porters hurried with baggage. Tourists blinked in the harsh sunlight. Beyond the fence, he saw strings of prayer flags snapping in the wind. Red, blue, green, yellow, white, faded, but alive. He had come without clear reason, at least not one he could articulate. Friends had told him to go somewhere quiet, somewhere that might pull him out of the gray fog he'd been living in. He wasn't looking for adventure. He wasn't looking for photographs. He was looking, perhaps, for silence, for something to press against the ache that had made his days indistinguishable. A taxi carried him through Leh town. Narrow streets lined with whitewashed houses, wooden windows painted turquoise. Women sold apricots in wicker baskets. Dogs slept in the dust. Above all this ordinary rhythm rose the monasteries, perched on cliffs like stone guardians. He saw them in the distance. Thixi, Hemis, Spitak, names he barely remembered from guidebooks. They seemed less like buildings and more like extensions of the mountains themselves. And he thought, perhaps there is something here that can answer the question I do not know how to ask. It was in the late afternoon, when shadows stretched long across the valley, that he found himself climbing the steps to Thixi Monastery. The climb was not long, but the thin air made every step deliberate. Prayer wheels spun gently on his left, clinking softly with each turn. The smell of butter lamps, heavy, smoky, sweet, drifted toward him. Inside, the monastery was hushed, not silent exactly. He could hear the muffled chant of young monks somewhere deeper in the complex, their voices weaving in and out like the flow of a river, but hushed in a way that made the air itself seem reverent. He wandered past a series of paintings, mandalas drawn with such intricacy that they seemed like maps of unseen worlds. Finally, he entered the main prayer hall. There, dominating the space, sat the golden statue of Maitreya Buddha. Tall, serene, eyes half-lidded, as if gazing simultaneously inward and outward. He stood still for a long while. Something in the calm expression unsettled him. Not because it was alien, but because it felt too familiar, like it could see the restlessness he carried. A voice interrupted gently. "You are breathing too quickly. The mountain air punishes those who hurry." The man turned. An elderly monk stood in the doorway. His robes were simple, maroon and saffron, worn from years of use. His face was lined but not weak. His eyes were sharp, steady, the way some people's eyes remain after a lifetime of looking inward rather than outward. The man smiled awkwardly. "I'm not used to the altitude." The monk nodded. "Few are. Sit, and let the air sit with you." He motioned to a low bench near the wall. The traveler sat, grateful. The monk poured butter tea into 2 small cups and handed one to him. The tea was thick, salty, foreign, but warming. "You have come far," the monk said. "And yet not far at all." The man frowned. "What do you mean?" The monk smiled faintly. "Distance is measured in footsteps, but suffering is measured in silence. You carry much of it." "I can see it even as you drink your tea." The man looked down, startled by the accuracy. He didn't answer. The monk went on. "When I was young, I thought people came to monasteries to learn about gods. That is only partly true. They come because the walls here are quiet enough for them to hear their own hearts. You may not like what you hear, but you must listen." They sat together in the fading light. Outside, the valley stretched endlessly, rivers glinting like threads of silver. After a while, the monk spoke again. "Would you like to hear the stories of these mountains? They are not mine. They belong to time. But sometimes, time allows me to share them." The man nodded. Something about the old monk's presence, calm but unwavering, invited trust. The monk closed his eyes for a moment, as though searching through memory. Then he began. "These lands are full of silence, but silence itself tells stories. Every cliff, every stone has listened longer than we have lived. You asked for nothing, and that is good." Those who demand stories do not deserve them. Those who simply sit and drink tea, they may hear what the mountains whisper. The man leaned forward, the taste of the butter tea still on his tongue, the thin mountain air filling his lungs. The monk said softly, "Then let me tell you first of the wandering prince." The monk's voice grew lower, steady, like the mountain wind pressed into words. "Long before you were born, long before even I was born, a prince came to these valleys. His name is not remembered in books, and that is fitting, for he came here to forget his name. He was born across the mountains, in a kingdom of green valleys and tall palaces. He had silks to wear, horses to ride, armies to command. Yet all this pressed on him like a cage. His father, the king, wanted him to rule. His mother wanted him to marry. His brothers wanted him to lead them in battle. But the prince, he wanted none of it. He used to climb the palace walls at night and stare at the moon. He told himself, "If the moon does not bow to any king, why should I?" One night he left. No guards, no servants, no announcement. He walked away from his own crown. For weeks he wandered through deserts, across rivers, through forests where no one knew his name. He ate what he could, slept where he fell. Finally, he reached Ladakh and saw for the first time these barren mountains, bare as bone, sharp as truth. Here he thought he could disappear. He entered a small monastery, no larger than this hall. The monks asked him his name. He said, "I am no one." They accepted him, for to them every man is no one, and every man is also infinite. But the prince carried his past like a hidden dagger. He shaved his head, wore robes, chanted the prayers. Yet at night, when all others slept, he still dreamed of the throne he abandoned. His dreams were not sweet, they were heavy. He wondered if he was cowardly for leaving, if he had betrayed those who depended on him. One winter, harsh winds swept the valley. Supplies ran low. People from the nearby village came to the monastery for food and warmth. The prince, now a monk, watched their suffering. The villagers asked the monks for guidance. They asked for protection from raiders who came from the passes. They asked for hope. The monks prayed, but prayer did not bring food. Prayer did not fight raiders. The prince felt his blood stir again, the blood of command, of responsibility. He wanted to take up a sword, to lead, to save. But he had no sword now. He had only words. So he did what he could. He told the villagers stories. At night, when the winds howled, he spoke to them of compassion, of courage, of patience. His voice became their fire, and slowly they began to endure. They shared food when they had none to spare. They stood watch together at night, unarmed but united. They survived the winter not by force, but by kindness. And the prince, he survived too. He realized that his throne was not the palace he had abandoned. His throne was wherever he sat with people who suffered and chose not to turn away. In spring, when the passes opened again, news came from his homeland. His father was dead. His brothers were at war over succession. They sent for him. They begged him to return and rule. But the prince, now only a monk, refused. He said, "I have found a kingdom greater than the one I left. It has no borders. Its soldiers are compassion. Its treasury is silence. Its flag is the prayer that rises in the heart." He died here in Ladakh, nameless, buried beneath a cairn of stones. The wind carried his story, and that is why I can tell it to you now. Do you understand, traveler? The man listened. He felt the butter tea cooling in his hands. Untouched. "I think so," he said slowly. "You're saying, duty doesn't end when you walk away. It follows you." The monk's eyes softened. "Yes and no. Duty is not a chain. It is a river. You can try to step out, but the river still flows around you." The prince thought he was escaping his throne, but what he found was the throne inside himself. The traveler lowered his head. For months, no, for years, he had been running from his own burdens. From expectations he failed to meet, from people he thought he had disappointed. And here was this story, peeling the excuses away. The monk did not press. He let the silence stretch, as if silence itself was the lesson. Then, after a time, he spoke again. "Would you like to hear another story? This one, about a lake that remembers the soul." The traveler looked up, unsettled but eager. "Yes, please." The monk closed his eyes, as though pulling the tale from the marrow of the mountains. The monk drew in a breath that seemed to carry the weight of years. His gaze drifted toward the mountains outside. Their silhouettes cut against the fading sky. "There is a lake," he began, "high in the folds of the Ladakhi mountains. Few have seen it, fewer still have returned from it. It has no name. The villagers call it simply the Hidden Lake. They say its waters are clear as glass, so clear that when you lean over, you do not see your face. You see your soul. And that is why the lake is both a blessing and a danger." "Listen, and I will tell you what happened to the man who sought it." The traveler's grip tightened around his teacup. The monk's voice had changed softer, yet edged with something unyielding, like stone beneath snow. "There was once a merchant who lived in these valleys. He was rich by the measure of his neighbors. His caravans carried salt and wool, turquoise and tea, across the passes. But riches, like fire, only grow hungrier. He wanted more. One evening, in the village, he overheard an old shepherd speak of the hidden lake. The shepherd said that those who gazed into its waters might find treasures not of gold or silk.
Like a fleeting gleam. Pages turn in books unread. Echoes linger, words unsaid. The air is
But of the spirit, visions, wisdom, perhaps even power. The merchant heard only the word treasure. The next morning, he left with no companions, no map. He followed rumors, footprints of stories scattered like prayer flags torn by wind. He climbed higher than the paths allowed, where the air grew thin and the rocks gave no shelter. At last, after many days, he found it. A bowl of water nestled among jagged cliffs, still and untouched. The sky above was mirrored perfectly in its surface. No ripple disturbed it. The merchant knelt at the shore. He leaned over and looked in, but he did not see the clouds. He did not see the sky. He saw himself, not as he was, but as he longed to be. A man with jewels dripping from his hands. With cities bowing before his wealth, with immortality itself offered like a coin. His breath caught. He thought, "It is mine, all of it. This lake shows me what awaits. I need only to claim it." So he stepped forward into the water. The villagers say he did not sink like a man. He dissolved, like salt poured into a river. His body became the water. His hunger became the depth. And to this day, the lake holds his face, flickering just beneath the surface, luring those who look too long. That is why no monk goes there. That is why we do not speak of its location. The lake is not evil, no. It only reflects. But reflection is dangerous for those who cannot bear the truth of their own thirst.
whispers of time. They fade, they glow. Stories untold, and they flow.
The monk paused. His eyes, though calm, seemed to hold shadows. The traveler swallowed hard. So the lake shows not who we are, but what we desire. The monk tilted his head. Desire is only another mirror. What you long for is who you believe yourself to be. The merchant saw not riches, but the emptiness that demanded them. The lake did nothing but return his own hunger to him. The hall was quiet, save for the faint crackle of a butter lamp. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying with it the distant echo of a dog's bark in the valley below. The traveler's heart thudded. He thought of his own reflection, what he would see if he leaned over that lake. Would it show him the career he had failed to grasp? The life he wished he had lived? The love he had lost? Or would it show only the hollow silence he carried inside, stretched across a barren shore? He shook his head, as if to drive the thought away. But the monk saw it. "Do not fear the lake," the monk said gently. "It exists in you already. Every man has his own hidden lake." Most simply, never dare to look. The words sank into the traveler like stones into still water. He felt exposed, as though the monk had pulled the curtain away from something he'd been hiding, even from himself. For a while, neither spoke. The wind outside quieted. The butter lamps flickered lower. Then the monk's voice returned, softer now.
Here and gone, like a fleeting gleam.
Almost like a lullaby. Would you like another story? One not of desire, but of compassion, of a bodhisattva whose tears shaped the rivers you crossed to reach here. The traveler nodded slowly, still unsettled but unable to turn away.
The air is heavy, yet so thin. Time moves quiet like a stream.
Yes, he whispered. Tell me. The monk closed his eyes, and the lines on his face seemed to soften, as though the story itself was washing over him first before he let it flow into the world.
Pages turn in books unread, echoes linger, words unsaid.
The monk's hands rested on his knees, still as the prayer wheels outside. His voice, when it came, was softer, filled with a kind of tenderness that wrapped around the room. There is a tale older than the monasteries, older even than the kingdoms that rose and fell here. It is the tale of Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva of infinite compassion. They say Avalokiteshvara looked down upon the world and saw all beings trapped in the endless cycle of birth and suffering. He had vowed never to rest until every soul was freed, but as he gazed, he saw no end to the suffering. For each person who found peace, 10 more were born into pain. Despair pierced his heart, and in that despair he wept. His tears fell from the heavens onto these barren lands, and where each tear struck the earth, a river was born. The Indus, the Zanskar, the Shyok, all the rivers that give life to Ladakh. They say they are not water at all, but compassion made visible. That is why the rivers here never tire, never pause. They flow because compassion never ceases. But that is not the end of the story. For Avalokiteshvara wept so deeply that his body itself cracked from sorrow, splintered into 1,000 fragments. And yet, from those fragments, the people say, rose 1,000 forms of compassion. Each one a reminder that even in despair, compassion multiplies. Here in Ladakh, when villagers draw water, they do not thank the sky for rain, for the sky gives little here. They do not thank the soil, for the soil is stone. They thank the bodhisattva's tears. They say, when you drink water in this valley, you drink compassion itself. There is one more part, the part that is rarely told. Once, a hermit asked Avalokiteshvara, if your tears created rivers, then why do men still suffer? Why are their fields still barren? Their children still hungry? Their lives still short? And Avalokiteshvara answered, the rivers I gave were never meant to wash suffering away. They were meant to remind you how to endure. Water cannot prevent thirst forever, but it teaches you to drink deeply when you can, and to share the cup with another. The hermit bowed, for he understood. Compassion is not the end of suffering. Compassion is the way through it. The monk's words lingered in the air, slow and steady, as if each syllable itself was a drop falling into a vast river. The traveler closed his eyes. He pictured the rivers he had crossed on the road to Leh, thin silver veins cutting through the black rock, winding endlessly into the distance. He remembered standing on a bridge over the Indus, feeling the force of it pulling beneath him. He had not thought of it then as anything more than water. Now it was impossible not to. The monk broke the silence. You came here, didn't you, because something in you cracked? You thought the mountains would mend it. But perhaps the crack itself is a blessing. Perhaps it allows compassion to flow out as the rivers flow here. The traveler opened his mouth, then closed it again. He wanted to say yes, but the word caught in his throat. He wanted to admit his emptiness, the hollow space he carried where love and purpose used to live, but shame pressed him silent. The monk did not push. He simply sipped his tea, eyes lowered. At last, the traveler whispered, if compassion flows forever, why does it feel so hard to find in myself? The monk looked at him, gaze steady but not unkind. Because you mistake compassion for a feeling. It is not. It is an action. A river does not wait to feel like flowing. It flows. The words landed like a stone in the traveler's chest. He nodded slowly, though doubt still lingered. The monk leaned back. The butter lamps flickered shadows across his face, making his lined skin look like a map of valleys. He drew a deep breath. "There is one more tale for tonight," he said. "Not of kings, not of merchants, not even of gods. This is of a man like you, a soldier who came to these mountains carrying both a weapon and a question." The traveler felt his pulse quicken. He leaned forward. "What question?" The monk's eyes held his, unflinching. "The question of how to fight without hatred." The monk's voice grew quieter now, as though the story was not from centuries ago, but from a memory still alive in the air. "This happened not long ago. Perhaps before you were born, perhaps after. Time matters little. The mountains remember, and that is enough. There was a soldier posted at one of the high passes near the border. You must know the kind of place I mean, where wind cuts like knives, where snow blinds the eyes, where men stand watch against enemies they may never see. This soldier was young, younger than you, but his face had already learned to hide behind hardness. He had a rifle in his hands and orders in his ears. His duty was clear, to protect his country, to hold his post, to fight if needed. But his heart was not clear. You see, he had grown up in a family that taught him the value of kindness. His mother was gentle, his father patient. He had learned as a boy that life was sacred. Yet here, at the border, everything was reduced to one command: shoot if they come. One winter evening, his patrol passed near a monastery. The lamps glowed like stars fallen into the snow. The soldier, restless, slipped away and entered. He found an old monk, not unlike me, though perhaps less wrinkled, tending a butter lamp. The monk greeted him, offered tea, and asked no questions. The soldier sat in silence for a long while, until at last he spoke. He said, "I am ready to fight, but I do not know how to fight without hatred. And if I fight with hatred, am I any different from the one I fight against?" The monk listened, then set down his lamp. He said, "Tell me, when you stand guard at the pass, what do you protect?" The soldier replied, "My country." The monk asked again, "And what is your country?" The soldier hesitated. He thought of flags, of borders on maps, of commands from officers. But then he thought of his mother kneeling by the stove, of his father mending shoes, of children in the lane where he once played. "My country is my people," he said finally. The monk nodded. "Then protect them. Protect without possession. Defend without desire. You do not need hatred to guard what you love. Love itself is strength enough." The soldier frowned. "But how can I strike a man down without anger in my heart?" The monk leaned closer. "When a storm tears down your roof, do you curse the clouds? No, you rebuild." When a wolf comes for your sheep, do you hate the wolf? No, you drive it away. The storm, the wolf, they are not your enemies. They simply act according to their nature. Hatred poisons only you. Protection requires only clarity. The soldier sat in silence. His rifle leaned against the wall, cold and heavy. For the first time, it looked less like a weapon and more like a burden. The monk placed a hand on his shoulder. Do not ask how to kill without hatred. Ask instead how to live without hatred. The answer is the same. The soldier returned to his post the next day. His face was no softer, his duty no lighter. But those who served beside him noticed something had changed. He did not bark orders in anger. He did not curse the cold. He stood watch with the same vigilance, but when he spoke, his words carried calm instead of bitterness. He fought, yes, when fighting came, He fired his rifle when he had no choice, but he carried no hatred in his heart, only sorrow for the necessity and love for those he shielded behind him. And when, years later, he returned home, his village found him unchanged in one way. His eyes were clear, clearer, perhaps, than they had ever been. The monk's voice faded into silence. The butter lamp sputtered low. The traveler stared at him, struck by the weight of the story. His throat tightened. He thought of all the battles he had fought in his own life. Not with rifles, but with words, with ambition, with anger. And he wondered, had he ever fought without hatred? Or had hatred always been the shadow behind his struggle? He asked quietly,
The clock hums soft its ancient tune, shadows stretch beneath the moon.
and the soldier? Did he find peace? The monk gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. Peace is not a place you reach. It is the road you walk. And yes, he walked it. The traveler lowered his eyes. He felt exposed again, as if the monk was not telling him stories of princes or merchants or soldiers at all, but telling him stories of himself, hidden in disguise. Outside, the wind rattled the wooden windows of the monastery. The valley had slipped into darkness.
Pages turn in books unread, echoes linger, words unsaid. The air is heavy, yet
Somewhere in the distance, a drumbeat of chanting rose, slow and steady, as if the mountains themselves were breathing. The monk turned back to him. I have told you 4 stories tonight, but stories are only seeds. What grows from them depends on the soil of your heart. Tomorrow, before the sun rises, you will walk from here. But before
pages turn in books unread, echoes linger, words unsaid. The air is heavy, yet so thin.
you leave, there is one more thing you must hear. Not a story, a truth. The traveler looked up sharply. What truth? The monk leaned forward, his eyes sharp and unblinking. The mountains are not an escape. They are a mirror. You did not come here to lose yourself. You came here to find the self you have been running from. The words struck the traveler like a bell. He could not answer. His chest ached. His hands trembled around the empty cup. The monk sat back, letting silence hold the room. And in that silence, the traveler felt the weight of all 4 stories pressing into him at once. The prince's burden, the merchant's hunger, the bodhisattva's tears, the soldier's clarity. They were not distant legends anymore. They were fragments of his own reflection.